what's happened here is a total loss of history by the media. I've been listening to NPR over the last few days. You know, they don't know when to start their analysis. So they just assume U.S. troops in Iraq, the invasion of Iraq was okay legally, and that any defense by a neighboring country that's threatened, imagine if that happened with Mexico or Canada in the U.S., is okay. They don't start there. So I just want to very briefly go over the situation between the U.S. and Iran. President Trump, no doubt, is looking for the next polls on what he did in Iraq last week. And the polls reflect a lot of ignorance of history. And I just want to point out that if you're sitting in Iran over the last few decades, here's what you experienced, and you're not going to forget it. In 1953, Washington overthrew the duly elected Prime Minister Mossadegh in Iran, who's very popular. And they overthrew him because he wanted to take back some Iranian sovereignty over the imperial Anglo-American oil company that controlled Iranian oil. And then the federal government in Washington installed the dictatorial Shah for over 25 years that terrorized people in Iran who wanted to use a little freedom and wanted to use some democracy, all with the backing of the U.S. Iranians don't forget this. And then in the late 70s, the federal government went into Saddam Hussein's offices and in effect said, you know, you can take a slice of southwest Iran because the new Ayatollah regime is not in full control. So they supported this invasion by Saddam Hussein in Iraq of Iran with hundreds of thousands of casualties over a few years. Iranians don't forget that. And then George W. Bush named Iraq and Iran an axis of evil, invaded and overthrew the regime in Iraq. And Iran was saying, are we going to be next? And Iran now is completely surrounded by the U.S. military. And we're saying, why are they in Iraq? Why is Iran in Syria and Lebanon? What would we do if the shoe was on the other foot? They're trying to defend their own sovereignty. And so now when ISIS rose, General Soleimani mobilized almost 500,000 militia in Iraq and also Iranian soldiers to fight ISIS, taking horrible casualties, which probably saved several thousand American soldiers' lives. You have a very unstable president. He's very ignorant of what's going on. He's very lazy. He spent 1 out of every 5 days as president on a golf course. And what's happened to make the situation so dangerous for the American people, never mind over there in Iran, is that he has replaced 2 cabinet secretaries who used to push back a bit, Secretary of Defense Jim Mathis and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and he replaced former General John Kelly, who was chief of staff and pushed back in the White House, with yes men. He now has Esper, fresh out of Raytheon, as Secretary of Defense, yes man. He has Pompeo, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, a yes man, and he has in the White House surrounded by yes men like Mike Mulvaney. So it's a very dangerous situation.